let us start with this sutra. It's the first sutra in the Digha Nikaya, so it's a big deal. It's called the Brahmajala Sutta. Brahma is also a name for the big God with a capital G, not an angel, but the big God, Brahma. And Jala means net. So here he's saying the supreme net. And the supreme net, he's going to use this to show how every view, every perspective that someone can take through their thinking about reality can get caught by this net that the Buddha is going to set. Whether it's a big, large, great well, blue well, or a little fish. This net will get them all. Whether it's a big perspective about reality or a little perspective about reality. They all fall into this net. And I actually like this, how the sutra starts, because it teaches us something about how we should regard the teachings when we're discussing it. And I myself, being a big proponent for the sutras, I need to remember this teaching that it starts off with. And so I'll read the first part. As always, it starts off with, thus have I heard. That way, we're not saying this is what happened. This is just what we have heard. And after we listen to this, we can take the information and use it to our benefit if we wish to or not. But that's why we say, thus have I heard. Once the Lord was traveling along the main road between Rahagaha and Nalanda with a large company of some 500 monks. And the wanderer Supiya was traveling on that road with his pupil, the youth Brahmadatta. And Supiya was finding fault in all sorts of ways with the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha, whereas his pupil, Brahmadatta, was speaking in various ways in their praise. And so these two, teacher and pupil, directly opposing each other's arguments, followed behind the Lord and his monks. Then the Lord stopped for one night with his monks at the royal park of Ambala Tika, and Supiya too stopped there for the night with his pupil Brahmadatta. And Supiya went on abusing the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha, while his pupil Brahmadatta defended them. And thus disputing, they followed close behind the Buddha and the order of monks. So that's very interesting that one is totally against them and the other is totally for them. Yet they're both following behind the Buddha and the monks. They both are, they want to keep following.
And there's the student that's defying his teacher within his opinion.
Yeah, but here,
that is some kind of meaning.
The next we'll see the Buddha, what he thinks about the person disparaging and the person praising. So this says, now in the early morning, a number of monks having got up, gathered together and sat in the round pavilion, and this was their trend of their talk. It is wonderful, friends. It is marvelous how the blessed Lord, the Arahant, the fully enlightened Buddha, knows and sees and clearly distinguishes different inclinations of beings. For here is a wanderer, Supiya, finding fault in all sorts of ways with the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha, while his pupil, Brahmadatta, in various ways defends them. And still disputing, they follow closely behind the blessed Lord and his order of monks. Then the Lord, being aware of what those monks were saying, went to the round pavilion and sat down on the prepared seat. Then he said, monks, what was the subject of your conversation just now? What talk have I interrupted? And they told him, monks, if anyone should speak in disparagement of me, of the Dhamma, or of the Sangha, you should not be angry, resentful, or upset on that account. If you were to be angry or displeased at such disparagement, that would only be a hindrance to you. For if others disparage me, the Dhamma or the Sangha, and you are angry or displeased, can you recognize whether what they say is right or not? No, Lord, they answered. If others disparage me, the Dhamma or the Sangha, then you must explain what is incorrect as being incorrect, saying, that is incorrect, that is false, that is not our way, that is not found among us. So here he wants you to stay level-headed. Don't get emotionally aroused with anger, because if you do, that's going to affect your thinking, and then affecting your thinking, you're not going to be able to see what is the flaw in what they're saying, if there is a flaw, And so he wants us to stay calm.
Matter of fact.
The next thing he says, but monks, if others should speak in praise of me, of the Dhamma, or of the Sangha, you should not on that account be pleased, happy, or elated. If you were to be pleased, happy, or elated at such praise, that would be only a hindrance to you. If others praise me, the Dhamma, or the Sangha, you should acknowledge that the truth of what is true, saying, that is correct, that is right, that is our way, and that is found among us. So he's saying, even if someone is so excited praising us, praising the Buddha, the Dhamma, or the Sangha, you shouldn't get excited and about that praise, because even excitement and pleasure is a disturbance of the mind and affects our thinking properly and clearly.
You're personalizing.
You're personalizing, definitely, because you like it.
On either side.
On either side. And he says, it is, monks, for elementary, inferior matters of moral practice that the worldling would praise the Tathagata. So he's saying, even if they are praising, they're usually praising for inferior things, things that don't really matter, or not at least not don't matter as much as other things. He says, and what are these elementary, inferior matters for which the worldling would praise him? Then it goes on, he's going to explain what are the things that regular people will praise the Buddha about. And he says, and he's saying this to remind them why you shouldn't get excited about someone praising, because they may not even praise the Buddha, the Tathagata, for the right reasons. They might praise him for superficial reasons. And he goes on to explain some of these superficial reasons they might praise him. He goes, abandoning the taking of life, the ascetic Gautama dwells refraining from taking life. Abandoning false speech, the ascetic Gautama dwells from refraining from false speech. Abandoning taking what is not given, the ascetic Gautama dwells refraining from taking what is not given. Abandoning malicious speech, he does not repeat there what he has heard here to the detriment of these, or repeat here what he heard there to the detriment of those. So he's not gossiping, he's not stealing, he's not killing, he's not saying lies. Abandoning harsh speech, he refrains from it. He speaks whatever is blameless, pleasing to the ear, agreeable, reaching the heart, pleasing and attractive to the multitude. Abandoning idle chatter, he speaks at the right time what is correct and to the point of the Dhamma and discipline. He is a speaker whose words are to be treasured, seasonable, reasoned, well-defined, connected with the goal. Thus the worldling would praise the Tathagata. And it goes on, the ascetic Gautama is a refrainer from damaging seeds and crops. He eats once a day and not at night, refraining from eating at improper times. He avoids watching dancing, singing, music shows, and abstains from using garlands, perfumes, cosmetic, ornaments, adornments. He avoids using high or wide beds. He avoids accepting gold and silver. He avoids accepting raw grain and raw flesh. He does not accept women and young girls, male or female, slaves, sheep and goats, cocks and pigs, elephants, cattle, horses, mares, fields, and plots. He refrains from running errands, from buying and selling, from cheating with false weights and measures, from bribery and corruption, deception and insincerity, from wounding, killing, imprisoning, highway robbery, and taking food by force. Thus the worldling would praise the Tathagata. So here he's saying what he would like everyone to practice, the 5 precepts, and then he goes on even further than the 5 precepts on how he is restrained in behavior. But he gave this as the first example of what the worldly person will praise the Buddha about.
And it's just like how we all should be.
Yeah.
You know?
It's not,
Common,
this is just
common decency.
Yeah, common decency, the first step. But this is not why the Buddha is exalted as the Buddha, not because of this common decency. And then it goes on to the middle section of virtue. That was the small section of virtue. Now it goes to the middle section. And he says, whereas, gentlemen, some ascetics and Brahmins, so that's a kind of a special term, because now he's saying some ascetics and Brahmins. An ascetic in Pali, he uses the word samana, and samana can be translated as a shaman, the person who goes into the wilderness alone and experiments with his own perception to realize the truth. He says ascetics, which is samanas or shamans, and Brahmins. A Brahmin, in my opinion, it's someone who is a man of God, someone who wants to follow the way of God, which in reality means the way of goodness, the supreme goodness. So whether someone's a shaman practicing with his own perception or someone's a man of God and practices what is good, he's using these two as examples, because these were the spiritual people of back then, and even now, we can say.
And the way he defines Brahman is that worthy of it, not that born into it, who knows genetics.
He had many debates.
So when he uses the word Brahman, he's probably referring to his definition.
Definitely. Back then, Brahman used to be known as a caste. They thought you're a Brahmin if you're born from a mother who's a Brahmin and a father who's a Brahmin. 7 generations back. But the Buddha had a conversation and said, what are the true reasons someone's a Brahmin? And this guy who was considered a top Brahmin had this conversation with the Buddha, and he ended up cutting away a lot of the reasons why they thought a Brahmin was a Brahmin, like birth and other things.
Right.
And they ended up with only virtue, sila, and wisdom, panya. Those are the 2 things that make a Brahmin, virtue and wisdom. So here he's talking about now ascetics and Brahmins, people who claim to be virtuous and wise. So, whereas, gentlemen, some ascetics and Brahmins, feeding on the food of the faithful, are addicted to the destruction of such seeds as are propagated from roots, from stems, from joints, from cuttings, from seeds, the ascetic Gautama refrains from such destruction. So he's not out there picking food, he just gets offered whatever is offered. Then it goes, whereas some ascetics and Brahmins feeding on the food of the faithful remain addicted to enjoyment of stored up goods such as food, drink, clothing, carriages, beds, perfumes, meat, and the ascetic Gautama refrains from such enjoyments. So there's some so-called virtuous and wise people who get offered foods, but then they just store it up. That's an improper way of getting food offered to you. If they're offering food to you, they hope that you're going to be practicing right. Or else what benefit do they get from offering food to someone who's not practicing the correct way? So then it goes on, and whereas some ascetics and Brahmins remain addicted to attending shows as dancing, singing, music displays, recitations, hand music, cymbals and drums, and fairy shows, acrobatic and conjuring tricks, combats of elephants, buffaloes, bulls, goats, rams, cocks, and quail, fighting with the staves, boxing, wrestling, sham fights, parades, maneuvers, and military reviews, the ascetic Gautama refrains from attending such displays. And then it keeps going on all the things that these so-called virtuous and wise people proclaim themselves to be virtuous and wise, but then they go and behave a different way than a virtuous and wise person. He goes on to say, some ascetics and Brahmins remain addicted to high and wide beds, long chairs, couches adorned with animal figures, fleecy, variegated coverlets with the hair on both sides or on one side, silk coverlets embroidered with gems and without. He goes on to say the Buddha refrains from such things high and wide beds. Whereas some ascetics and Brahmins remain addicted to such forms of self-adornment and embellishment as rubbing the body with perfumes, massaging, bathing in scented water, shampooing, using mirrors, ointments, garlands, scents, unguents, cosmetics, bracelets, headbands, fancy sticks, and so on. The ascetic Gautama refrains from such things. Whereas some ascetics and Brahmins remain addicted to unedifying conversation or conversations not suitable, such as kings, robbers, ministers, armies, dangers, wars, food, drink, clothes, bed, garments, perfumes, relatives, carriages, villages, towns and cities, countries, women, heroes, street, and well gossip, talk of the departed, desultory chat, speculations about land and sea, talk about existence here or there. The ascetic Gautama refrains from such conversations. So he's not talking about mindless things. He only speaks about the Dhamma and what leads to the goal of liberation. Whereas some ascetics and Brahmins remain addicted to disputation, such as, you don't understand the doctrine and discipline, I do. How could you understand this doctrine and discipline? Your way is all wrong, mine is right. I'm consistent, you aren't. You said what you said last, what you should have said first. You said first what you should have said last. What you took so long to think of has been refuted. Your argument has been overthrown. You're defeated. Go on, save your doctrine. Get out of that if you can. The ascetic Gautama refrains from such disputation. He's not out there quarreling with anyone, debating with anyone. He's only about peace and liberation of the mind through wisdom. Whereas some ascetics and Brahmins remain addicted to such things as running errands and messages, such as for kings, ministers, nobles, Brahmins, householders, young men who say, go here, go there, take this there, bring that from there. The ascetic Gautama refrains from such errand running. He's not out there like a priest for a king, doing what he wants and what he bids. Whereas some ascetics and Brahmins remain addicted to deception, patter, hinting, belittling, and are always on the make for further gains, the ascetic Gautama refrains from such deception. Thus, the worldling would praise the Tathagata. So this is the second reasons why the normal person even praises the Buddha. And here he's still going over things that are superficial, that are not to the core of the teaching. Then it goes to the long section of morality. Whereas some ascetics and Brahmins, feeding on the food of the faithful, what is offered by the lay people, make their living by such base arts, such as wrong means of livelihood, as reading palms, divining by signs, portents, dreams, body marks, mouse gnawings, fire oblations from a ladle, the husk, rice powder, rice grains, ghee or oil from the mouth or of blood, reading fingertips, house and garden lore, skill in charms, ghost lore, earth house lore, snake lore, poison lore, rat lore, bird lore, crow lore, foretelling a person's lifespan, charms against arrows, knowledge of animals' cries. The ascetic Gautama refrains from such base arts and wrong means of livelihood. He's not out there like a psychic taking money to give you your fortune and doing those things. Whereas some ascetics and Brahmins make their living by such base arts as judging the marks of gems, sticks, clothes, swords, spears, arrows, weapons, women, men, boys, girls, male and female slaves, elephants, horses, buffaloes, bulls, crows, goats, rams, cocks, quail, iguanas, bamboo rats, tortoises, deer, and the ascetic Gautama refrains from such base arts. Whereas some ascetics and Brahmins make their living by such base arts as predicting the chiefs will march out, the chiefs will march back, our chiefs will advance and other chiefs will retreat, our chiefs will win and the other chiefs will lose, other chiefs will win and ours will lose. Thus there will be a victory for one side and defeat for the other. The ascetic Gautama refrains from such base arts. He's not out there predicting who's going to go to war, who's going to win the war. His mind is not on these worldly types of thoughts. Whereas some ascetics and Brahmins make their living by such base arts as predicting an eclipse of the moon, the sun, the star, that the sun and moon will go on their proper course, will go astray, that a star will go on its proper course, or will go astray, that there will be a shower of meteors or blaze in the sky, an earthquake, thunder, a rising, setting, darkening, brightening of the moon, the sun, and the stars, and such will be the outcome of these things. The ascetic Gautama refrains from such base arts and wrong means of livelihood. So he's not an astronomer or into astrology.
Not pulling a hustle.
Yeah, he's not, yeah, exactly, he's not pulling a hustle. And it goes, whereas some ascetics and Brahmins make their living by such base arts as arranging the giving and taking in marriage, engagements, and divorces, declaring the time for saving and spending, bringing good or bad luck, using spells to bind the tongue, binding the jaw, making the hands jerk, causing deafness, getting answers with mirror, girl medium, a deva, worshipping the sun, a great Brahma, breathing fire, invoking the goddess of luck. The ascetic Gautama refrains from such base arts and wrong livelihood. Whereas some ascetics and Brahmins, feeding on the food of the faithful, make their living by such base arts, such as wrong means of livelihood, as appeasing the devas, redeeming vows to them. Devas are gods, redeeming vows to them, or angels. Making earth house spells, causing virility or impotence, preparing and consecrating buildings, giving ritual rinsings and bathings, making sacrifices, giving emetics, purges, exporents, and phlegmagogies, giving ear, eye, nose medicine, ointment, counter ointments, eye surgery, pediatry, using bombs to counter the side effects of previous remedies. The ascetic Gautama refrains from such base arts and wrong means of livelihood. So he's not out there trying to cure people or
priestly or shaman duties.
Yes.
That's true.
And then he goes on to say, if monks for such elementary inferior matters of moral practice that the world it is monks for such elementary inferior matters of moral practice that the worldling would praise the Tathagata. And then he says, there are monks other matters, profound, hard to see, hard to understand, peaceful, excellent, beyond mere thought, subtle, to be experienced by the wise, which the Tathagata, having realized them by his own super knowledge, proclaims, and about which those who would truthfully praise the Tathagata would rightly speak. And what are these matters? So now he's moved on from talking about the superficial things. So he's going to start talking about what he should actually be praised for. And these things he's going to talk about, he does so by first explaining what is normally thought of as the 62 types of perspectives about reality. And a perspective about reality, most people will not only have a perspective about reality, but they're also going to claim and personalize that perspective and claim it as right and others wrong. This is what happens whenever we take any perspective and personalize it and claim. So he's going to start talking about the perspectives about reality. There are amongst some ascetics and Brahmins who are speculators about the past, having fixed perspectives about the past, who have put forward various speculative theories about the past in 18 different ways. And on what basis, what grounds do they do so? There are some ascetics and Brahmins who are eternalists, who proclaim the eternity of the self and the world in 4 ways. Here amongst a certain ascetic or Brahmin has, by means of effort, exertion, application, earnestness, and right attention, attained such a state of mental equilibrium that he thereby recalls his past experiences. So there he's saying that there are some Brahmins who can get into the meditative state of mental equilibrium, which means samadhi, where you calm the mind so much that you can see reality a little clearly, or you can see things that others cannot see without getting into deep meditation. And where he says, and he thereby recalls past experiences, he's talking about lives in the past. In the same way, you can think about what you did yesterday. Oh, I went to work. Oh, I went to the market. This is the way that someone who gets into the deep meditations can recall a past life. It's not that he existed in the past. He's just recalling a memory of an experience. Just the same way you're recalling a memory of what happened yesterday. By getting into deep meditation, you can recall what happened in the past experience before you got into this one. He goes on, thereby recalls past experience such as 1 birth, 2 births, 3, 4, 5, 10 births, 100 births, 1,000, 100,000 births, several hundred, several thousand, several 100,000 births. There my name was so-and-so, my clan was so-and-so, my caste was so-and-so, my food was such and such, I experienced such and such pleasant and painful conditions. I lived for so long. Having passed away from there, I arose there. There my name was so and so, and having passed away from there, I arose here. Thus he remembers various past lives, their conditions and details, and he says, the self and the world are eternal, barren, like a mountain peak, set firmly as a post. These beings rush around, circulate, and pass away and re-arise, but this remains eternally. Why so? I have, by means of effort, exertion, attained to such a state of mental equilibrium that I have thereby recalled various past experiences. That is how I know the self and the world are eternal. That is the first way in which some ascetics and Brahmins proclaim the eternity of the self and the world. So if someone is going into meditation and they're seeing these past experiences, they know that they used to call him this name, he had this family, he had this experience, he ate this, he wore that, he lived this long, and then he sees that happening over and over, hundreds of thousands of past births. He's going to think, yeah, this is eternal. It goes on and on and on. That's an inference he made by going into that meditation experience. It's just an inference, a perspective about reality. Then it goes on to, that's the first wrong view. It says, that is the first way in which some ascetic or Brahmin proclaims the eternity of the self and the world. And then it goes on to the second wrong perspective. And what is the second way? Here amongst a certain ascetic or Brahmin has the means of effort and exertion attained to such a state of mental equilibrium that he thereby recalls one period of contraction and expansion. So what he's saying there is the universe, the normal person will say there was the Big Bang, right? That Big Bang started off the expansion. But after a while, it's going to start to get cold and start to contract on itself again. So it's talking about an eon where the universe exploded and expanded, and then it's going to contract again. So he's saying that he saw a whole eon where the universe expanded and contracted. And he says 2 such periods, 3 or 4 or 5 or 10 periods of contraction or expansion. It's 10 eons, 10 universes.
It's kind of interesting that they actually talk about expansion and contraction.
Yeah, that's because the Buddha.
Kind of physics here.
The Buddha was the first quantum physicist. And he says, there my name was so-and-so, and it goes on through these expansions, contractions and expansions. And he says, that is the second way in which some ascetics and Brahmins proclaim the eternity of the self and the world. And then it goes to the wrong perspective number 3. And what is the third way? Here amongst a certain ascetic or Brahmin has by means of effort attained to such a state of mental equilibrium that he recalls 10, 20, 30, 40 periods of contraction and expansion. There my name was so-and-so, and so on. That is the third way in which some ascetics and Brahmins proclaim the eternity of the self and the world. And what is the fourth way? Here a certain ascetic or Brahmin is a logician, a reasoner, hammering out by reason, following his own line of thought, he argues, the self and the world are eternal, barren like a mountain peak, set firmly on a post. These beings rush around, circulate, pass away, and re-arise, but this remains forever. That is the fourth way in which some ascetics and Brahmins proclaim the eternity of the self and the world. So that's pretty interesting. That just hit me. The first 3 ways is through mental equilibrium, through getting into deep jhana, states of meditation. The other way is by reasoning, just using your rational...
A physicist to the whiteboard.
Yeah.
What's interesting in the pattern I see is to gain a great deal of deep knowledge others don't have, and then believe you have everything.
Yes.
Because you never know what you don't have.
Yes. That's why...
It's like even in theoretical logic, you can put all the possibilities in there, but you don't know what possibilities you're not thinking of.
That's true. And at the end of this sutra,
that's an assumption.
The Buddha is going to get to that. It's an inference. Yeah, right. And the Buddha is going to talk about how did this inference come about. That's the key. We'll continue. And then it says, this month these are the 4 ways in which these ascetics and Brahmins are eternalists and proclaim the eternity of the self and the world on 4 grounds. And whatever ascetics or Brahmins are eternalists and proclaim the eternity of the self in the world, they do so on one or other of these four grounds. There is no other way. This, monks, the Tathagata understands. These perspectives, thus personalized and clung to, will lead to further existence. This the Tathagata knows and more, and he is not attached to that knowledge. And being thus unattached, he has experienced for himself perfect peace. And having truly understood the arising and passing away of feelings, their attraction and the peril and the deliverance from them, the Tathagata is liberated without remainder. So there he's saying, like, he understands this view, he understands this line of reasoning, he understands this inference made by these people who have gone into deep meditation. But he understands this so well, he's seeing the big picture, he goes beyond it. And by going beyond it, he's not personalizing it. And not personalizing it, he knows how the feelings come up and what are the problems with feelings. What is one of the problems of feelings? They lead to emotion. That's the next logical step to a feeling. If it's pleasurable, you like it. If it's painful, you hate it. That's the peril of feelings. So he knows the arising, the peril, and how to liberate yourself from this feeling. Therefore, the Tathagata is liberated without remainder. Therefore, he experienced nirvana. And then he goes on to say, there are amongst other matters profound, hard to see, hard to understand, peaceful, excellent, beyond mere thought, subtle, to be experienced by the wise, which the Tathagata, having realized them by his own super knowledge, proclaims, about which those who would truthfully praise the Tathagata would rightly speak. And what are these matters? He goes on to speak about more perspectives. There are amongst some ascetics and Brahmins who are partly eternalists and partly non-eternalists, who proclaim a partial eternity and a partial non-eternity of the self and the world in four ways. So first there was people saying it's eternal, the self and the world. Now there's some saying some of it is eternal, some of it is not eternal. He goes on, when there comes a time, monks, sooner or later, after a long period, when the world, and when he says the world, he's talking about the universe. When the universe contracts, at that time of contraction, beings are mostly reborn in the Abhasara realm, Abhasara Brahma realm. Abhasara is a Pali word, and I heard Bhante Punaji describe it as pure radiation.
You're talking about in between big bangs.
In between big bangs, there's no matter. What we call matter. We know matter is energy, but there's no, I guess we can call it no collapsing of particles into, no collapsing of waves into particles. So it's just energy. So they're reborn in a realm of pure energy, which we can call it a realm of pure radiation. And then he goes, so that's what happens when it contracts. There's no more beings in the universe because there's no universe, and they're all born in a realm of pure energy according to their merits, according to the results of their good actions.
It's like a dimension with no time or space.
We can see it that way.
Because time and space is part of this big bang.
Yeah. And he says, they're reborn in the Abhasara Brahma world. And there they dwell mind-made, feeding on contentment, self-luminous, moving through the air, glorious, and they stay like that for a very long time. And then it goes on to talk about the next wrong perspective based on this experience. But the time comes sooner or later after a long period when this world begins to expand. The universe begins to expand. It's a cycle, right? Just like breathing in and breathing out.
And the seasons.
Yeah, everything's a cycle. Everything's a rhythm. In this expanding universe, an empty palace of Brahma. We already discussed Brahma is the main made God, right? The president of the universe, the king of the universe, the CEO. An empty palace of Brahma appears after the universe starts to expand again. And it says, and then one being from the exhaustion of his lifespan in the Abhasara Brahma realm, or of his merits, falls from the Abhasara world, the radiation world, and arises in the empty Brahma palace in the newly expanding universe. And it says, and there he dwells, mind-made, feeding on contentment, self-luminous, moving through the air, glorious, and he stays like that for a very long time. Then in this being who has been alone for so long, there arises unrest, discontent, and worry. And he thinks, oh, if only some other beings would come here. And the other beings, from exhaustion of their lifespan, of their merits, fall from the Abhasara realm and arise in this newly Brahma palace as companions to that first being. And there they dwell mind-made, and they stay like that for a very long time. And then, monks, that being who first arose there thinks, I am Brahma.
He thinks he created them.
I am great Brahma. I am the conqueror, the unconquered, the all-seeing, the all-powerful, the Lord, the maker and creator, ruler, appointer and orderer, Father of all that have been and shall be. These beings were created by me. How so? Because I first had this thought, oh, if only some other beings would come here. That was my wish. And then these beings came into existence. But those beings who arose subsequently think, this, friends, is Brahma, the great Brahma, the conqueror, the unconquered, the all-seeing, the all-powerful, the Lord, the maker, the creator, the ruler, appointer, and orderer, the Father of all that has been and shall be. How so? We have seen that he was here first, and we arose after him. So the beings who came from that radiation realm and took a birth in the Brahma realm saw that there was someone there. So like, he must be the CEO. He's in charge.
The angels think God made them.
Yep, exactly.
God thinks he made them.
Yep, exactly. All right.
And then read this by some Christians.
Yep. That's why I find this interesting. That's what they're thinking, right? And then it says, and this being that arose first is longer lived, more beautiful, more powerful than they are. And it may happen that some being falls from that realm and arises in this world. So someone from that Brahma palace might fall from that experience and takes birth in the world here. Falls from that realm and arises in this world. Having arisen in this world, he goes forth from household life to homelessness. He becomes a mendicant, a monk almost. Having gone forth, he, by means of effort, exertion, application, earnestness, and right attention, attains such a degree of mental equilibrium that he thereby recalls his last existence, but recalls none other before that. So him in the human realm, he gets into the state of meditation. His mind is perfectly still, that he can pierce into reality to recall his past experience, but not before that.
Right.
He doesn't remember being in the Abhasara realm. He only remembers
before the Big Bang.
Before the Big Bang. He only appears in the Brahma realm where God was there. So
where actually it seems like this consciousness is emerging. They seem to be able to identify themselves as a self, in a sense, and the difference between them and Brahma. So that would indicate consciousness. So you can't remember before consciousness.
Yeah, we're actually going to talk about that too. There are some beings that are born in realms where they're not even sentient, and we're going to talk about that. So he goes, he recalls his last experience, but not the one before that. So he says, and he thinks that Brahma, he made us. He is permanent, stable, eternal, not subject to change, the same forever and ever. But we who are created by Brahma, we are impermanent. We are unstable, short-lived, fated to fall away and to have come into this world. That is the first case where some ascetics and Brahmins are partly eternalists and partly non-eternalists. So some people, even now, will think, yeah, God and in his heaven, he's eternal, full of pleasure, but we are born and we die. That's what
But it's also interesting because here he's saying, when we talk about that we create the world in our mind, the whole matrix idea, right? Well, that's actually showing the world being created in mind. There.
Yeah, every moment you're creating the universe by your understanding of
Right,
experience.
that kind of parallels the whole creation of Brahma and the other divas.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is very interesting how the Buddha is going to go step by step through every perspective you can have about reality.
This is a heavy suit.
Yeah, man.
I'm surprised you did it.
Yeah, when you asked me, I was a little deterred, but I'm like, I can do it.
Because I was half joking, I didn't think you would. You know?
I'm glad you did, because now I understand it a lot better.
Because you have to look at it differently.
I have to understand it in order to explain it. And then it goes on to the next, the sixth wrong perspective, or illogical perspective. And what is the second way? There are monks, certain devas called corrupted by pleasure. They spend an excessive amount of time addicted to merriment and play and enjoyment, so that their mindfulness, their attention, is dissipated, and by that dissipation of attention, those beings fall from that state. So I read into this. Apparently, it's like a dimension where the angels are constantly experiencing pleasure, and if they miss a meal, they instantly lose all their energy, and then they fall from that state. And so here it's saying
because they have a break in pleasure, they experience displeasure. Now they're different.
It says, yeah, exactly, that by dissipation of attention, they fall from that state. They get distracted and fall from that state. And then it says, and it can happen that a being having fallen from that state arises in the world. Having arisen in this world, he goes forth from household life into homelessness. Having gone forth, he, by means of effort and exertion, recalls his last experience, and he recalls none before that. He thinks those angels who are not corrupted by pleasure do not spend an excessive amount of time addicted to merriment and play and enjoyment. Thus their attention is not dissipated, so they do not fall from that state. They are permanent and stable and eternal, not subject to change, the same forever and ever. But we who are corrupted by pleasure spend an excessive amount of time addicted to merriment, play, and enjoyment. Thus we by dissipation of attention have fallen from that state. We are impermanent, unstable, short-lived, fated to fall away, and we have come to this world. This is the second case. So he recalls that state of where the angels are experiencing nothing but pleasure, and then he comes into this.
He's a fallen angel.
He's a fallen angel and in the human realm, and he recalls, yeah, they are permanent, because the ones that don't get distracted, they stay there forever. That's his inference based on his experience through meditation. So then it goes on to the wrong perspective, number 7, the illogical perspective. And what is the third way? There are amongst some devas that are corrupted in mind. They spend an excessive amount of time regarding each other with envy. By this means their minds are corrupted. On account of their corrupted minds, they become weary in body and mind, and they fall from that place. I think they call these the similar to the asuras, the jealous gods.
I was also wondering, sorry, it doesn't mention Mara being the creator of the world. It sounds like Mara might be one of those.
Mara? That's
Because,
interesting. It could be.
Because also Mara is referred to as the creator of the world. All right, so
Yeah.
so it'd be interesting. It doesn't, but this Sutta doesn't mention Mara, does it?
I don't think so. But I think Mara would be happy if you believed in any of these wrong perspectives, if there is a Mara. And he says, there are certain devas called corrupted by mind. They spend an excessive amount of time with each other, regarding each other with envy. By this means, their minds are corrupted. On account of their corrupted minds, they become weary in body and mind, and they fall from that place. And it can happen that a being, having fallen from that state, arises in this world. He recalls his last experience and recalls none before that. He thinks those reverend angels who are not corrupted by mind do not spend an excessive amount of time regarding each other with envy. They do not become corrupted in mind or weary in body and mind, and so they do not fall from that state. They are permanent, stable, eternal, but we who are corrupted in mind are impermanent, unstable, short-lived, fated to fall away, and we have come to this world. This is the third case. Then it goes on to the illogical perspective, number 8. And what is the fourth way? Here, a certain ascetic or Brahma is a logician, a reasoner, hammering out by reason, following his own line of thought. He argues, whatever is called the eye, or the ear, or the nose, or tongue, or body, that is impermanent, unstable, non-eternal, liable to change. But what is called the mood, the thinking, and the perception, that is a self that is permanent, stable, eternal, subject to change, the same forever and ever. So there, he's saying, the fourth case, he's saying the body that's impermanent. The mind, that lasts forever.
Consciousness, like the soul idea.
And similar to Descartes, I think therefore I am, he personalized the mind.
Not my favorite philosopher.
This is the fourth case. These are the four ways in which these ascetics and Brahmins are partly eternalists and partly non-eternalists. Whatever ascetics or Brahmins proclaim the partial eternity or the partial non-eternity of the self in the world, they do so on one or other of these four grounds. There is no other way. This month the Tathagata understands. These perspectives, thus personalized and clung to, will lead to further and further existence. This the Tathagata knows and more, but he is not attached to that knowledge, and being thus unattached, he has experienced for himself perfect peace. And having truly understood the arising and passing away of feelings, their attraction and peril, and the deliverance from them, the Tathagata is liberated without remainder. These months are those other matters profound, hard to see, hard to understand, peaceful, excellent, beyond mere thought, subtle, to be experienced by the wise, which the Tathagata, having realized them by his own super knowledge, proclaims, and about which those who would truthfully praise the Tathagata would rightly speak. There are monks, some ascetics or Brahmins, who are finiteness and infiniteness. So some people who think that there's the world or the self is finite, and others who think that it's infinite. What are they? It goes on to perspective, illogical perspective number 9. Here, a certain ascetic or Brahmin has, by means of effort, attained to such a state of mental equilibrium that he dwells perceiving the world as finite. He thinks, this world is finite, bounded by a circle. How so? Because I have attained such a state of mental equilibrium that I perceiving the world as finite. Therefore, I know that this world is finite and bounded by a circle. So that's all he experienced in his meditation. So he's saying, this is how it is. That's my perspective about reality.
The materialism kind of.
Almost, yeah. And it goes illogical perspective number 10. And what is the second way? Here, a certain ascetic or Brahmin has attained such a state of mental equilibrium that he dwells perceiving the world as infinite. He thinks, this world is infinite and unbounded. Those ascetics and Brahmins who say it is finite and bounded are wrong. How so? Because I have attained such a state of mental equilibrium that I dwell perceiving the world as infinite. Therefore, I know that this world is infinite and unbounded. So he made an inference based on his experience in meditation.
It's interesting too, the experience I had, what I talked about with you. If I think I was clear on it, that's why I had nothing left in my mind from it. But that experience of like knowing, understanding everything. If a fragment of information had traveled into that recognition period, that in-between area, yeah, you would attach to it like how we described those other things.
That would have been reality.
It would be a natural thing to attach and say, I understand now. Because I did understand, but now I'm only hearing part of it. And the rest of it's all pre-conscious. So
that's why me and Bhante Sanata have spoken about this. It's not proper to make inferences, or at least to regard inferences as reality based on your experience. Every inference is only an inference.
Well, because once you get to concepts, you get to language, you get so limited.
And we're going to see why at the end. Hoping that we make it to the end. Let's see. Well, we got an hour. We got time. Here are certain... now we're going to the third way. The 11th illogical perspective. And what is the third way? Here, a certain ascetic or Brahmin has attained such a state of consciousness that he dwells perceiving the world as finite up and down, but infinite across. He thinks the world is finite and infinite. Those ascetics or Brahmins who say that it is finite are wrong, and those ascetics who say that it's infinite are wrong. How so? Because I have attained such a state of mental equilibrium that I dwell perceiving the world as finite up and down and infinite across. Therefore, I know that this world is both finite and infinite. This is the third case. So it's kind of like we can kind of think of it like regarding space as infinite and then time as finite, or the opposite.
Also, I'm saying it's when it's like a conceptual absolute. The concept is only a concept.
Yep, that's
reality and concept are so far apart, and then when you have this absolute concept, this is it. It can't be it, because it can only be your view from your perspective.
Yep. But what are these guys doing? They're all attached to that.
Attaching to that.
Exactly. And then it goes on to the 12th illogical perspective. And what is the fourth case? Here, a certain ascetic or Brahmin is a logician, a reasoner, hammering out by reason. He argues, the world is neither finite nor infinite. Those who say it is finite are wrong. So are those who say that it is infinite, and those who say that it's finite and infinite. This world is neither finite nor infinite. This is the fourth case. So someone just reasoning out this inference.
It's also like an attempt to hold on to something and having enough wisdom to see absolutes or problems. You're trying to find a loophole.
Mm-hmm. These are the four ways in which these ascetics and Brahmins are finiteness and infiniteness, and proclaim the finitude and infinitude of the world on four grounds. There are no other way. This month the Tathagata understands these points, thus personalized and clung to, will lead to further and further existence. These months are those other matters profound, hard to see, hard to understand, peaceful, excellent, beyond mere thought, subtle, to be experienced by the wise, which the Tathagata, having realized them by his own super knowledge, proclaims, and about which those who are truthfully praised the Tathagata would rightly speak. Oh, this is a funny one. There are monks, some ascetics or Brahmins, who are eel-wrigglers. An eel-wriggler, why does he use that term? There's a Pali word called amara, and it's also known for the deathless, because mara is death, marana. Amara is deathless, but it's also a double meaning for a fish or an eel that gets captured, but wriggles its way out of there. So he's calling certain people who talk about their perspectives, but always wriggle their way out of any assertion. He goes, when asked about this or that matter, they resort to evasive statements. They wriggle like eels on four grounds. What are they?
Apologists.
In this case, there is an ascetic or Brahmin who does not in truth know whether a thing is good or bad. He thinks, I do not in truth know whether this is good or whether it is bad. Not knowing which is right, I might declare this is good or this is bad, and that might be a lie. And that would distress me. And if I were to be distressed, that would be a hindrance to me. Thus, fearing to lie, abhorring to lie, he does not declare a thing to be good or bad. But when asked about this or that matter, he resorts to evasive statements and wriggles like an eel. I don't say this. I don't say that. I don't say it is otherwise. I don't say it is not. I don't say it is. I do not say that it's not. This is the first case. So someone who's just debates but has no grounds for any assertion. Then the 14th illogical perspective. What is the second way? Here an ascetic or Brahmin does not in truth know whether a thing is good or bad. He thinks, I might declare that is good or that is bad. I might feel desire or lust or hatred or aversion. If I felt desire, lust, hatred, or aversion, that would be an attachment on my part. If I felt attachment, that would distress me. And if I were distressed, it would be a hindrance to me. Thus, fearing attachment, abhorring attachment, he resorts to evasive statements. This is the second case. And what is the third way? Here an ascetic or Brahmin does not in truth know whether a thing is good or bad. He thinks, I might declare that is good or that is bad. But there are ascetics or Brahmins who are wise, skillful, practiced debaters, like archers who can split hairs, who go around destroying others' views with their wisdom. They might cross-examine me, demanding my reasons and arguing, and I might not be able to reply. Not being able to reply would distress me, and if I were distressed, that would be a hindrance to me. Thus, fearing debate, abhorring debate, he resorts to evasive statements. This is the third case. And what is the fourth way? Here an ascetic or Brahmin is dull and stupid. Because of his dullness and stupidity, when he is questioned, he resorts to evasive statements and wriggles like an eel. If you ask me whether there is another world, if I thought so, I would say there is another world. But I don't say so. I don't say otherwise. I don't say it is not, and I don't not say that it is not. Is there no other world? Is there both another world and no other world? Is there neither another world nor another world? Is there spontaneously born beings? Are there not both or neither? Does the Tathagata exist after death? Does he not exist after death? Does both exist or not exist after death? Does he neither exist nor exist after death? If I thought so, I would say so. I don't say that it is not. This is the fourth case. So someone who's just not going to make any claim, but
that's actually kind of what the Buddha does. He goes, it's not a good question.
But the Buddha will give you a reason, but this guy doesn't give any reason. These are the four ways in which those ascetics and Brahmins who are eel-wrigglers resort to evasive statements. There is no other way. This monks the Tathagata understands. These perspectives, thus personalized and clung to, will lead to further and further existence. These monks are those other matters profound, hard to see, which the Tathagata, having realized them by his own super-knowledge, proclaims, and about which those who would truthfully praise the Tathagata would rightly speak. Then he goes on to the next perspective people have. There are monks, some ascetics and Brahmins, who are chance originationists, and who proclaim the chance origin of the self and the world on two grounds. What are they? So they think that everything happens spontaneously for no reason, just chance. And this is the 17th wrong perspective or illogical perspective. There are among certain angels called the insentient. Here it says unconscious. I looked up the Pali. It says they don't feel sensation. So I think the word insentient is better. So you're not feeling any sensations. As soon as perception or as soon as sensation arises in them, those angels fall from that realm. And it may happen that a being falls from that realm and arises in this world. He recalls his last experience, but none before that. He thinks the self and the world have arisen by chance. How so? Before this, I didn't exist because he was insentient. Now from not being, I have been brought into being. This is the first case. So he thinks everything just happened by chance, randomly, because I remember my last experience and there was nothing. That was because there was no sensation he was experiencing. And then it goes, what is the second case? The 18th illogical perspective. Here an ascetic or Brahmin is a logician, a reasoner. He hammers out with his own opinion and declares, the self and the world have arisen by chance. This is the second case. I've come across some friends in my philosophy club when I used to go there at LAVC that have kind of this perspective. Like we're humans just because of chance. The Big Bang started just by chance. So there are people who believe this, that use their logic to come to this conclusion and perspective. This monks the Tathagata understand. These are the two ways in which those ascetics and Brahmins who are chance originists proclaim the chance origin of the self and the world. There is no other way. These monks are those other matters profound and hard to see, which the Tathagata, having realized them by his own super knowledge, proclaims, and about which those who would truthfully praise the Tathagata would rightly speak. And these monks are the 18 ways in which these ascetics and Brahmins are speculators about the past. There is no other way. So all the perspectives we've gone through so far are inferences about the past based on their own experience. This monks the Tathagata understands. There are amongst some other ascetics and Brahmins who are speculators about the future, having fixed perspectives about the future, and who put forward various speculative theories about the future in 44 different ways. And what are the bases and grounds do they do so? There are among some ascetics and Brahmins who proclaim the doctrine of sentient post-mortem survival, or conscious post-mortem survival, and do so in 16 different ways. On what basis? So they think that there's survival of something that is conscious after the dissipation of the body.
Right, like the consciousness soul idea again.
They declare that the self after death is healthy and conscious and have an image, or are imageless, or both image and imageless, or neither image or imageless, are finite, infinite, both or neither, of uniform sensation, of varied sensation, of limited sensation, of unlimited sensation, wholly happy, wholly miserable, both or neither. So they're saying that there's some people who think that you're going to go on consciously experiencing one of these 16 things I just said, either with an image or without an image. Here it says material. The only reason we think there's a material thing is because we see an image in our mind, and we call this material. But I like to use image because that's what the Pali word rupa really means, not material. It's a mental image. So there's all these 16 ways that we think, or someone might come to a perspective that you go on consciously, with an image, without an image, with or without, and so on. These are the 16 ways in which these ascetics or Brahmins proclaim the doctrine of conscious post-mortem survival. There is no other way. This monks the Tathagata understands. These monks are those other matters profound, hard to see, which the Tathagata, having realized them by his own super knowledge, proclaims, and about which those who would truthfully praise the Tathagata would rightly speak. Then it goes on. There are among some ascetics or Brahmins who proclaim the doctrine of unconscious post-mortem survival. So you go on, but you're unconscious of it. On what basis? They declare that the self after death is healthy and unconscious with image or imageless, or both or neither, or finite or infinite, or both or neither. They think that the self goes on unconsciously in one of these states. These are the 8 ways in which ascetics and Brahmins proclaim the doctrine of unconscious post-mortem survival. There's no other way. This monks the Tathagata understands. These monks are those matters profound, hard to see, which the Tathagata, having realized them by his own super knowledge, proclaims, and about which those who would truthfully praise the Tathagata would rightly speak. There are some ascetics and Brahmins who declare the doctrine of neither consciousness nor unconsciousness post-mortem survival, and they do so in 8 ways. And on what basis? They declare that the self after death is healthy and neither conscious nor neither unconscious, and have an image, imageless, both, neither, finite, infinite, both, or neither. So when it's saying neither conscious nor unconscious, it's saying you neither feel a sensation nor feel no sensation. So when you're conscious, you feel sensation. When you're unconscious, you don't feel a sensation. And here it's saying you're neither conscious nor unconscious. In Pali, it would be neva, sanya, na sanya. Sanya is sensation. This monks the Tathagata understands. These monks are those other matters profound, hard to see, which the Tathagata, having realized them by his own super knowledge, proclaims, and about which those who would truthfully praise the Tathagata would rightly speak. There are among some ascetics or Brahmins who are annihilationists, who proclaim the annihilation, destruction, and non-existence of beings, and they do so in 7 ways. On what basis? Here, a certain ascetic or Brahmin declares or holds the view, since the self is material, or the self is an image, composed of the 4 great elements, the product of mother and father, at the breaking up of the body, it is annihilated, perishes, and does not exist after death. This is the way in which the self is annihilated. That is how some proclaim the annihilation and destruction of non-existence and the non-existence of beings. Then another says to him, Sir, there is such a self that you say, I don't deny it, but the self is not wholly annihilated. For there is another self, divine, with an image and belonging to the sensual realm, fed on real food, palpable food. You don't know it or see it, but I do. It is that self that on the breaking up of the body, it perishes. So he's saying, yeah, the self you said exists, but that's not the real annihilation of the self at the end of the body. It is the divine body that experiences the sensual realm through the senses, that really, when that passes away, that's the true annihilation of the self. Then it goes on. And we're already on illogical view number 53, because a bunch of the conscious and unconscious post-mortem survival, that was a ton of them. So now we're on 53. Another says to him, Sir, there is such a self that you say, I don't deny it, but that self is not wholly annihilated. For there is another self, divine, with an image, but it's mind-made. So it's not through the sensual realm, but it's mind-made, complete with all its parts, not defective in any sense organ. It is this self that on the breaking up of the body, it perishes and is annihilated. And then someone else says, the logical view number 54, or logical perspective number 54. Another says to him, Sir, there is such a self as you say, I don't deny it, but there is another self which, by the passing it's entirely beyond bodily sensations, by the disappearance of all sense of resistance, and by non-attraction to the sensation of diversity, seeing that space is infinite, he realizes the realm of infinite space. It is this self that at the breaking up of the body, that it perishes, is annihilated. So this guy's going beyond the mind to a state of infinite space. And he says that self that experiences that, when the body perishes, that's the self that is annihilated.
So that if you're a drop of water and you get a drop of the ocean, you're not a drop of water anymore, but you're back to being like part of the whole ocean. Is that kind of an analogy that?
I think he's saying that he experienced a state of infinite space, which is the 5th level of samadhi, and he thinks that's the real self, and that's the self that's going to get annihilated when it passes away. That's what he thinks. The analogy you're using is better suited when we're talking about compassion, because when we think about others' well-being, and we become selfless because now others are the same as ourselves, that's when the water dissipates into the ocean. The river becomes the ocean. So let's go to illogical view number 55. Another says to them, there is an...
You're going to sleep well tonight.
Yeah. There is another self which, by the passing away entirely beyond the sphere or realm of infinite space, seeing that perception is infinite, has realized the sphere of infinite perception. It is this self that at the breaking up of the body perishes and is annihilated. So this guy, he experienced a deeper state of meditation to the 6th level of samadhi, where he experiences infinite perception. He's saying that self that experienced that, that's the real self. That's the one that's going to be annihilated when this body perishes. So now we go to illogical view number 55. Another says to them, there is another self which, by the passing entirely beyond the realm of infinite perception, seeing that there is nothing, has realized the realm of infinite nothingness. That's the 7th level of samadhi. So he goes into the state of that there's nothing. And he says this self is the one that at the breaking up of the body is annihilated. So it's just each person has experienced a state that the other hasn't, and they're saying this is the self. This state is the self.
And they're saying that self is annihilated with the body.
Yeah, they also think that there's nothing after the body.
The
Exactly.
body's annihilated, now you're just that.
Exactly.
As opposed to that.
You become into consciousness.
Say you don't, that actually goes away. So
they get into this state of consciousness, of perception, that there is nothing, or infinite space, or infinite perception, whatever state.
Yeah, but once the body is gone, then there's that being, just that energy, that the body is gone, so then we're just this being, that emptiness.
In this section where he's talking about the people who believe in an annihilation after death, they may not think that there's a consciousness anymore. They may think that it's done. But the self, when you say there is a self, that only comes if you are personalizing. The only way you can create a sense of self is to personalize an experience. And these guys are personalizing the experience of nothingness. So then we go to number 57. We're almost there. It's only 62, so we're almost there. Illogical.
I will sleep.
Illogical perspective number 57. Another says to him, "Sir, there is such a self as you say. I don't deny it, but the self is not wholly annihilated at that point. For there is another self which, by the passing entirely beyond the sphere of nothingness and seeing this is peaceful, this is sublime, has realized the sphere of neither sensation nor no sensation. You don't know it or see it, but I do. It is this self that at the breaking up of the body is annihilated and perishes and does not exist after death. This is the way in which the self is completely annihilated. That is how some proclaim annihilation, destruction, and non-existence of beings." So this guy got to the 8th level of samadhi, where you're not even sure if you're experiencing a sensation or no sensation. And it's peaceful and sublime, because if you're not experiencing a sensation, or you're not even sure, you're not creating a perception, you're not creating a cognition, you're not getting the feelings, you're not getting the emotion, you're not personalizing, you're not doing all these things. So it seems like a peaceful state, because you're not getting... There's a simile of us getting sensations through our eyes. It's like bacteria getting into an open wound. So this state of neither sensation or no sensation is a state where there's no bacteria contaminating you and hurting you.
Of the, I guess you could probably the influxes.
The influxes, yeah. So we're getting, so this is the state of neither sensation or no sensation. And he says that self, he personalized that experience by creating a self, by personalizing. He says that's the self that when the body perishes, that's the self that experienced that neither sensation or no sensation state. That's the self that really is annihilated. All these other selves that we talked about before, those are not the real self. I went deeper than these guys, so this is the real self. Then it says, "These are the 7 ways in which these ascetics and Brahmins proclaim the doctrine of annihilation, destruction, non-existence of beings. There are no other ways. This, monks, is the Tathagata understands. These monks are those other matters, profound, hard to see, which the Tathagata, having realized them by his own super knowledge, proclaims, and about which those who would truthfully praise the Tathagata would rightly speak. There are among some ascetics and Brahmins who are proclaimers." Oh, now we're going to the next one. The next one's pretty interesting. "There are amongst some ascetics and Brahmins who are proclaimers of nirvana here and now." They proclaim nirvana here and now. "And who proclaim nirvana here and now for the existent being in 5 ways, and on what grounds? Here a certain ascetic and Brahmin declares and holds the view, in as far as this self, being furnished and endowed with the 5-fold sense pleasures, indulges in them, then that is when the self realizes the highest nirvana here and now. Some proclaim it." So some people say that, I guess if you just flood yourself with sensual pleasure, you get into that state of nirvana here and now. We can look at that as maybe like LSD. You take LSD.
I know that there's like Hindu Indian things too, where they indulge in everything to the point that you just like burn it out. And supposing enlightenment through indulgence, that there is a school of that thought. That's some kind of Hindu thing.
Could be. Here, this state of constant pleasure is like, I think they're putting it as a lower, inferior state of jhana, of ecstasy, of meditation ecstasy. But they're doing it by just getting flooded by pleasure. That's why I called it's similar to like taking a psychedelic.
Yeah. When you use the word pleasure, it's like we said before, we have like 5 different words. What are you using that one word for?
Pleasure here
so
just...
talk about pleasure like the sense of joy and meditating type of pleasure, not like consumption pleasure.
No, here is talking about sense pleasures.
Okay.
So it's not talking about
Pleasure of
meditation.
the world.
Mhm.
Good food, good liquor, good women.
The five chords of
Right.
pleasure. The five senses,
Right.
whatever pleasant
Right.
sensations you can get through the five senses.
Okay.
Then it goes on to the illogical view number 59. And this will make more sense of why he was talking about sense pleasures and why I called it an inferior state of samadhi. Someone who's in a constant state of pleasure, they may not even need to meditate because they're feeling pleasure constantly. But here we're going to go past that state. Of course, we can see that.
Well, could that exist with impermanence being like a real thing?
It couldn't exist because you can't keep flooding the body. You'd have to.
You can't.
Yeah.
Everything has to have opposite, so that's impossible.
It is impossible. That's why it is illogical view.
Yeah.
But that is also why I say it can be similar to psychedelics, because you take LSD.
It's a false high.
It's a false high. It's going to last like 14 hours, 10 hours. And in that state, you're so happy. You're free of a self. So then it goes on to the next illogical view. Another says to him, "Sir, there is such a self as you say. I don't deny it. But that is not where the self realizes the highest nirvana here and now. Why so? Because, sir, sense desires are impermanent, painful, and subject to change. And from their change and transformation, there arises sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, and distress." What would Ramdas say? When he's coming down from that high, it's the saddest moment of his life. He's crying. He would use that Bible metaphor of wearing the wrong garment to the wedding. When they see you're wearing the wrong garment, they kick you out, and you get tossed into the utter darkness, gnashing your teeth with much crying. That's because he got into it in the wrong way with LSD, chemical based, rather than a mental equilibrium. So this next view, illogical view, that's saying that's not the real nirvana. This is the real nirvana. That's not real nirvana because it's subject to change, which Ramdas experienced, and that's why he went to India to look for a guru to find out what is the real map. And then it goes on. But when this self, detached from sense desires, detached from unwholesome states, enters and abides in the first jhana, which is accompanied by inquiry and inference, and by contentment and pleasure, born of detachment, that is when the self realizes the highest nirvana here and now. So he's saying when you reach the first jhana is characterized by having inquiry and inference, and by having cognitive contentment, physical pleasure or comfort, and unification of mind. And this guy's saying that way is not the right way to have nirvana here and now. This is the nirvana here and now. The first jhana is what he's saying. But then that's the 59th illogical perspective. Now the 60th illogical perspective says, another says to him, "Sir, there is such a self as you say, but that is not when the self attains nirvana." And this is a little thing I just noticed. Each one, even the experience of jhana, they're still personalizing because they're calling it a self. So that's very interesting. There can't be no nirvana if you think there is a self. They don't go together. And it says, but that is not the self that attains nirvana. How so? Because on account of questioning and answering, inquiry and inference, that state is considered a disturbance of the mind. To question and to infer is a disturbance of the mind. But when the self, by the subsiding of inquiry and inference, enters and abides in the second jhana with inner tranquility and unification of mind, which is free from inquiry and inference and is born out of mental equilibrium and accompanied by cognitive contentment and physical comfort or pleasure, that is when the self realizes the highest nirvana here and now. So he's saying, no, the first jhana is not nirvana. That state of just flooding yourself with pleasure that I call the psychedelic state, that's not nirvana. The second jhana is nirvana.
Conscious state of well-being.
Because we got rid of inquiry and inference, the conceptual thinking, asking a question and then inferring what that answer is. You got rid of that. That's a much more peaceful state. That's the real nirvana. But that's another illogical view. So it goes on to the next one. Another says to him, "Sir, there is such a self as you say, but that is not the self that attains nirvana." How so? Because on account of the presence of cognitive contentment, there is mental exhilaration or an excitement in the mind. And that state is considered a disturbance. But when the self, which is with the dissipation of cognitive contentment, dwells in equanimity or at perception, a state where you're fully composed, mindful and clearly aware, experiencing in his own body that joy of which the noble ones say, happy he dwells, one who has equanimity and attention, and so enters and abides the third jhana, which is when the self realizes the highest nirvana here and now. So in the third jhana, you see, hey, in the first jhana, I got rid of the questioning and answering, which was a disturbance. In the second jhana, there's no questioning and answering, but you're saying, hey, maybe I can go to a more peaceful state by getting rid of this or reducing this cognitive contentment, which is also causing a disturbance in the mind. So they go into the third jhana, where there's nothing but equanimity, attention, and comfort through the body, pleasure through the body that comes from equanimity and attention. And he's saying this third jhana, this is nirvana here and now. And then another says, "Sir, there is such a self as you say. I don't deny it, but that is not where the self experiences the highest nirvana here and now. Why so? Because the mind contains the idea. The mind contains the idea of pleasure, and that is a disruptive state. That pleasure is a disturbance. But with the abandonment of pleasure and pain and the disappearance of joy and grief, one enters and abides in the state beyond pleasure and pain in the fourth jhana, which is purified by equanimity and attention. That is where the self realizes the highest nirvana here and now. That is how some proclaim the highest nirvana here and now for an existing being." So he's saying the fourth jhana, where you give up the questioning and answering, you give up the cognitive contentment, you give up the pleasure and comfort of the body. Now there's nothing but just attention and equanimity with focus centered within, and there's no such pleasure or pain. That's the fourth jhana. At that state you can truly see reality. But
using the word self in association to that description,
that shows that he's not seeing reality.
It's not there because,
Exactly.
I touched it once and it's like, you're not there.
And
You're there.
the only way one would get there at that state is if they heard Buddha speak about the Dhamma. Because at that state, you can remember what the Buddha said and you can look for it yourself and see reality. That's the shortcut the Buddha gave us. But this guy, this perception, this way of thinking, this perspective is saying the fourth jhana is nirvana for the self. Yeah, someone who gets there and says, yeah, I did it.
Yeah.
This is nirvana.
Yeah, it's like trying to grab hold of it, but the more you grab it, the more
You
you
lose
lose
it.
it.
Didn't do it, it happened when you didn't do it.
Mm-hmm. And then it says, this monks, the Tathagata, these are the 5 ways in which the ascetics and Brahmins proclaim the doctrine of nirvana here and now. There is no other way. This monks, the Tathagata understands. These are the 44 ways in which those ascetics and Brahmins who are speculators about the future, having fixed ideas about the future, put forward various speculative perspectives about the future. There is no other way. This monks, the Tathagata understands. These are the 62 ways in which those ascetics and Brahmins who are speculators about the past, the future, or both, put forward perspectives about these. There is no other way. This monks, the Tathagata understands. These perspectives, thus personalized and clung to, will lead to further and further existence. This the Tathagata knows, and more, but he is not attached to that knowledge. And being thus unattached, he has experienced for himself perfect peace, having truly understood the arising and passing away of feelings, their attraction and peril, and the deliverance from them, the Tathagata is liberated without remainder. Though these monks are those other matters profound, hard to see, hard to understand, peaceful, excellent, beyond mere thought, subtle to be experienced by the wise, which the Tathagata, having realized them by his own super knowledge, proclaims and about which those who would truthfully praise the Tathagata would rightly speak. Now we're getting at the end. We've gotten through the 62 illogical perspectives. So let's see what else the Buddha says now. Thus, monks, when those ascetics and Brahmins who are eternalists proclaim the eternity of the self and the world in four ways, that is merely a feeling of those who do not know and see, and worry and vacillation of those immersed in emotion, in the emotional urge. So that perspective is coming from a feeling, and they're immersed, because of that feeling, they're immersed in their own emotional urge, what they like and don't like. I like this perspective. I'm going to personalize this. This is reality. And then it says, when those who are partly eternalists and partly non-eternalists proclaim the partial eternity or the partial non-eternity of the self and the world in four ways, that is merely the feeling of those who do not know and see. When those who are finiteness or infiniteness proclaim the finitude or infinitude of the world on four grounds, that is merely a feeling of those who do not know and see. When those who are eel-wrigglers resort to evasive statements and wriggle like eels on four grounds, that is merely a feeling. When those who are chance originationists proclaim the chance origin of the self and the world on two grounds, this is merely the feeling. When those who are speculators about the past, having fixed views about the past, put forward various speculative theories about the past in 18 different ways, this is merely a feeling of those who do not know and see, and the worry and vacillation of those immersed in emotional urges. When those who proclaim the doctrine of sentient post-mortem survival or conscious post-mortem survival to do so in 16 different ways, that is merely a feeling. And those who proclaim a doctrine of unconscious post-mortem survival do so in 8 different ways, that is merely a feeling. When those who proclaim the doctrine of neither conscious nor unconscious, neither sensation or no sensation, post-mortem survival, do so in 8 ways, that is merely a feeling. When those who are annihilationists proclaim the annihilation, destruction, non-existence of beings in 7 ways, that is merely a feeling. When those who are proclaimers of nirvana here and now proclaim nirvana here and now for an existing being on 5 grounds, that is merely a feeling. When those who are speculators about the future in 44 different ways, when those ascetics and Brahmins who are speculators about the past, the future, or both, having fixed perspectives about put forward perspectives in 62 different ways, that is merely a feeling of those who do not know and see, and the worry and vacillation of those immersed in emotional urges. When those ascetics and Brahmins who are eternalists proclaim the eternity of the self and the world in 4 ways, that is conditioned by cognition. I'm going to repeat that. When those ascetics and Brahmins who are eternalists proclaim the eternity of the self and the world in 4 ways, that is conditioned by cognition. They came to this inference about reality, to this perspective about reality, based on cognition. We're going to go over that a little more in a moment. When those who are partly eternalists and partly non-eternalists, when those who are finiteness and infiniteness, when those who are eel-wrigglers, when those who are chance originationists, when those who are speculators about the past in 18 ways, when those who proclaim the doctrine of conscious post-mortem survival, when those who proclaim the doctrine of unconscious post-mortem survival, when those who proclaim the doctrine of neither conscious nor unconscious post-mortem survival, when those who are annihilationists, when those who are proclaimers of nirvana here and now, when those who are speculators about the future, when those ascetics and Brahmins who are speculators about the past, the future, or both, having fixed perspectives, put forward perspectives in 62 different ways, that is conditioned by cognition. That all these eternalists and the rest should experience that feeling without cognition is impossible. Feeling only comes due to the presence of cognition. To cognize is to create an object mentally using your six senses, information from the six senses. It gets to the brain. It uses information from all the six senses to cognize an object. And by creating an object, there's a feeling that comes from that. That's what he's saying. Every feeling is coming from this cognition.
That's how you create self.
Yeah.
Self.
Yeah, because after
cognition.
After the cognition, there's feeling,
and then cognition is an activity, a process, and then it's all your senses, all your aggregates come to one point. So we get this idea we have to have something behind it, and we create a self.
Yeah, and how is the self created?
It's not self-cognized when it's cognition that creates a self.
Yeah, so you said it's an activity, and it's an activity all the way to cognition. And then there's a feeling that comes from that cognition. And then there's an emotional urge based on that feeling. If it's pleasure, there's the urge for pleasure. If it's pain, there's the urge to get away from the pain. Or if it's neutral, there's the emotional urge that there's something existing. When it's neutral, there's something just there. So when there's an emotional urge, what happens? Now we split experience into the objective and the subjective. And we personalize the subjective. So up to that point, it's just activity causing activity, causing activity, causing activity. And then when we get to personalizing the emotion, how can we personalize unless there's a self? So we create a self by personalizing. Yeah, that's why the Buddha, after every perspective, wrong perspective or illogical perspective, he says, he understands this leads to further and further existence. Because you're having a cognition, you create an inference, that inference, it's a feeling there's an emotional urge. From the emotional urge, you personalize that emotion. By personalizing, you create a self, which is an existence. So let's see what else he says. I'm going to repeat it. With regards to all these, they experience these feelings by repeated cognition through the six sense bases. They experience these feelings by repeated cognition through the six sense bases. Feeling conditions emotion. Emotion conditions personalizing. Personalizing conditions existence. Existence conditions birth. As soon as you say there's something existing, which usually we point to the body, oh, this body is existing. I'm personalizing this body. Now the past of the body becomes your past. Now the past of or the future of the body becomes your future. So what's the past of the body? Existence conditions birth. So you think you exist, then you think you were born. Birth conditions aging and death. You think you were born, you think you're going to get old and die. So it says birth conditions aging, death, sorrow, lamentation, sadness, and distress. It's because you think you exist, because you think you were born, because you think you're going to get sick and old, that causes all the lamentation, all the stress and distress, all the pain that we create. When a monk understands as they really are the arising and passing away of the six bases of cognition, their attraction and peril, their deliverance from them, he knows that which goes beyond all perspectives. So every perspective is conditioned by cognition. But if you go by going beyond all perspectives, that means you understand what's happening in reality.
Perspective is a point to view from, or a point of view. If there's no point, how can there be perspective?
And here the Buddha says, how do you go beyond perspectives? By seeing the whole picture of reality. And what is he pointing out? That every perspective here, all these 62 ways of thinking, was started out from a cognition. And they took that as a truth, and they took that as reality, and everyone else wrong. But they don't even know where cognition comes from. That's why the Buddha says, When a monk understands as is really are the arising and passing away of these 6 bases of cognition, their attraction and peril, their deliverance from them, he knows that which goes beyond all perspectives. So how do we get to cognition? We are organisms in an environment. We get stimulated through the senses by the environment without our knowledge. Unconsciously, we're getting stimulated. That stimulation makes the mind start processing it like a computer. By processing it, there's a perception of what has been processed or constructed. When there's a perception of what has been processed or constructed, there's a name given to it and an image that has been created by that processing. So there's a name given to the image. And then when there's a perception and an identification of an image with a name, we use information from all our senses, because we can't interpret something without taking all our information. And so after name and image, there comes the information from all the 6 senses. And then when we gather when this information, like telephone wires go up to the brain, there's cognition. So it came from unconsciousness or insentience to mental construction, mind starts processing, to perception of what has been constructed, to naming an image that has been constructed.
Naming has to do with memory because you've seen it before.
Yep. It's based on your past experiences, and it's happening unconsciously.
Yeah, and then with the image, there's the sensation or the feeling or the hurt or the anger or the lust or whatever, and all these, and they all mix together. Yeah.
Yeah, because as soon as there's unconsciousness, then a mental construction, then a perception of what has been constructed, then by perception it identifies the image that has been constructed with a name. Then it uses all the information because you're getting perceptions from all the 5 senses, and then it goes up to the cognitive part of the brain, and that's where there's cognition. And then from this cognition, there's a feeling based on what you have cognized, and then based on that feeling, there's an emotional urge. And then based on that emotional urge, there's the personalizing this emotion. And then by personalizing, you create a sense of existence. And by creating that sense of existence, you create birth, aging, sickness, death, suffering, and all the distress that comes from that. So here the Buddha is saying, all the perspectives are born from cognitions. How can you say this is reality if you don't even know where how that cognition comes about? You're claiming and personalizing this perspective, but you don't understand how this perspective came about.
All judgment is based by comparison. All comparison is based on memory.
And here,
that's not what's in front of you.
They're not seeing what's happening right now.
Yeah.
And so let's see how it finishes up. I'm going to repeat it one more time because it's beautiful.
I'm going to read this again tomorrow morning too.
Yes. Just
all week.
Just know you're going to have to replace the words by yourself, because I'm replacing the words as I go to the proper translations in my view and my perspective. When a monk understands as they really are the arising and passing away of the 6 bases of cognition, their attraction and peril, and the deliverance from them, he knows that which goes beyond all perspectives. Whatever ascetics and Brahmins who are speculators about the past or the future, or both, having fixed perspectives on the matter and put forth speculative perspectives about it, these are all trapped in the net with its 62 divisions. And wherever they emerge and try to get out, they are caught and held in this net. Just as a skilled fisherman or his apprentice might cover a small piece of water with a fine mesh net, thinking, whatever large creatures there may be in this water, they are all trapped in this net and caught and held in this net. So it is with all these, they are trapped and caught in this net. Monks, the body of the Tathagata stands with the link bound to it by... Monks, the body of the Tathagata stands with the link of existence cut off. As long as this body subsists, angels and humans will see him. But at the breaking up of this body and the exhaustion of the lifespan, Angels and humans will see him no more. Monks, just as when a stalk of a bunch of mangoes has been cut, all the mangoes on it go with it. Just so the Tathagata's link to existence has been cut off. As long as the body subsists, angels and humans will see him. But at the breaking up of the body and the exhaustion of the lifespan, angels and humans will see him no more. So he's saying, yeah, here you see this walking body, and I can use the example of myself. This body here you're seeing speaking, creating vibrations in the air with this throat. But there's no existence here. There's no one existing here. And that's what the Buddha is saying. Yeah, right now the people and the angels, they all see this body, but I cut off all existence. How is that? He saw Paticca Samuppada. He saw the analysis of how this experience comes into being. He saw that from unconsciousness, the mental construction happens. From mental construction, there is a perception of what's being constructed. Then that perception identifies an image with a name. And then it uses the six senses to get all of the information to fully cognize an object. By cognizing an object, there is a feeling that comes from that object. From that feeling, there's an emotional urge that arises from that feeling. From that emotional urge, there is a personalization of that urge. By personalizing that urge, there is a creation of a existence. And by creating an existence, a mental concept of existence, you create birth, sickness, aging and death, and all the suffering that comes from that. So here the Buddha is saying, yeah, as long as you see this body, just know that it's cut off all of existence. There's no, even though there's a body walking around, there's no existence. And that's what he's saying. And then at these words, Venerable Ananda said to the Lord, "It is marvelous, Lord. It is wonderful. What is the name of this exposition of Dhamma?" Ananda, you may remember this exposition of Dhamma as the net of the goal, the net of the Dhamma, the supreme net, or the net of perspectives, or as the incomparable, unsurpassed victory in battle. Thus the Lord spoke, and the monks rejoiced with their delighted at his words, and as this exposition was being proclaimed, the 10,000 world systems, the whole universe shook. And that's how it ends.
It's like comparing this to like Bibles and Quran. It's just on another level.
Yeah,
It's just, you know,
it's penetrating reality.
it's just insane.
And it's penetrating reality independent of time. No past, no future.
No.
What's happening right
It's
now?
like, yeah.
This is the Dhamma, like this.
Yeah, it's a trip.
Thank you for taking the challenge. I challenged him.
Yeah, next time he'll give you the Bhante Puniji talk with Hume and Locke
Oh yeah.
and Berkeley.
I'm gonna say that on the retreat. On retreat on the 23rd.
Yeah, be here on the retreat.
I will be here.
They asked me to give a talk.
Yeah,
to
we've
the-
got all day, you might as well.
So come if you want to hear some more.
It was losing me in the beginning, I kind of thing that was repeating, but at the end, I went, whoa, I come alive.
Started to kick into high gear, right?
Ooh, and it's so surreal.
That's
You know
how-
what I mean?
That's
And
how.
I know that, you know